to be on. I want to take this moment to thank you and Brother Charles for even having me on and, providing this platform for us to discuss the issues that affect our people and the issues that our people are facing that are often not discussed in the mainstream media. So I appreciate you having us on tonight.
Wonderful. I am honored, and thank you for those words. You have honored me this evening. But I want to say to you that when you initially agreed to take on the subject of the physical and spiritual attack on the womb, I was very excited because I've wanted for some time to get into the particulars of this aspect of honoring the womb. So what I want to do is begin by allowing you to tell the listeners about your work as a naturopathic healer, and the things that you've done to contribute in this area to help women to better understand what it is we need to do to begin to regain control of ourselves and, in particular, of our womb.
Absolutely. My path into holistic healing was an unusual one because, I'm trained in the sciences, as you mentioned earlier, but I'm a trained microbiologist. So I've done lots of research and coursework at the universities and so forth in microbiology. But I went on from microbiology into molecular biology, DNA, understanding DNA. And that led me into working at some of the top pharmaceutical companies in the world. And that showed me from an insider's perspective what was going on. And as I became more conscious and understanding how these medications were being distributed, how they were being developed, how they were being put into our communities from the inside, I began to learn how this whole thing was being played out in terms of white supremacy. And so that led me into looking more for solutions instead of just creating problems. Because when you're working under the establishment in the pharmaceutical industry, as big of an industry as it is, you are often left wanting, a cure. Is there a cure for cancer? Is there a cure for AIDS?
Correct.
Is there a cure for rheumatoid arthritis? Is there a cure for heart disease? And, as I began to ask those questions and I got pushback and people began to call me a troublemaker and people began to look at me like, hey, who is this guy? He's asking the wrong questions. We're not in the business of curing diseases. We're in the business of treating diseases. And so we're going to treat diseases. We're not going to cure them. And so that didn't sit well with me. And, after years of trying to fight that battle from the inside to change the industry from the inside, I was fortunate enough to come into contact with Dr. LLaila Afrika, which is a great teacher, mentor, great brother that just put it down. And he was one of many who really kind of helped to get me a bridge into understanding it from the other side. And so I took all of those learnings and findings and I tried to apply them, as best I could, but I ran into a wall because I was not going along to get along. And that got me a lot of attention. It got me a lot of problems, but it ultimately got me a lot of common sense to know what was affecting our people and what wasn't. And because I had been able to climb so high in those industries, in that pharmaceutical world, in the medical world, I've worked in some of the research labs. I've worked in the laboratories. That gave me an inside view. So it's kind of like, the spook that sat by the door. You get in there and I get to see what y'all doing. And see, so that has given me a very unique position and perspective because now I know how these things are affecting our people and why they are affecting us in the way that they are, because it's all a part of global white supremacy. So long story short, work with Dr. Afrika, became a holistic certified naturopath physician, and, I have learned much from that as well, and really looking to put all the pieces together, because when we talk about naturopath medicine, it's not just prescribing something anymore. We're dealing with an issue as it comes black people, as it comes to people of African descent, this is a multi-faceted issue that's affecting our people. And the attack is being done on the black male, which we're going to probably get into another time.
Okay.
But the attack is also being done on the black female. And see, this is a strategic move to separate the black man and the black woman, but to also destroy the future of our legacy. And that is why, we need to talk about stuff like this. So,
right, that's right.
In a nutshell, that's where it is.
I'm loving it. That you're absolutely right, Jay. And I appreciate, I think most important that there are people like you who will ask the questions, but not only ask the questions, Jay, but also to seek out the answers, because it doesn't matter if we just see or identify that something is awry, but we have to follow through and be willing to do whatever is necessary under the pains of, whatever the consequences may be, because there are consequences for the decisions that you made.
Absolutely. I mean, when, my first issue working in the medical establishment, I was doing research on HIV/AIDS. In the laboratory, we were trying to understand the disease. We were trying to understand how was it that this disease, was, wreaking havoc just on the American population. And I came across several documents that, didn't quite fit in with what the medical establishment, what our team was telling us. And so I began to do research on that and say, wait a minute, this is affecting Africa like really bad. Like this thing is all over the place in Africa. And, that stood out to me because I've always had that African-centeredness, that perspective behind me. But to really get my mind around, okay, this disease is affecting African Americans, blacks, people of color at different levels than it was affecting the white population. That alone, kind of stood out to me, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then as I got into understanding how the disease, how it moves, how you get the disease, it does not attack the area where there's transmission. So when you transmit HIV/AIDS, it doesn't attack the area that it's transmitted from. And that was interesting because there's no virus on the planet that moves like that. So if you're having intercourse with someone and you by chance contract a virus sexually, you usually will see remnants of that disease in the genital area. HIV skipped over that, went directly into the endoplasmic reticulum, went right into the cells, and we're dealing with DNA now. So I was like, well, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. It's like a Trojan horse. So by the time a person knew that they had any evidence of a disease, they had already may have inadvertently infected other people. So then I began to understand the strategy behind white supremacy, and there's a strategy behind it, and how do I get the biggest bang for my buck?
Right.
How do I knock out as many people as possible without them knowing? So those types of things, give you questions, and then as you seek those answers, people don't want to hear, people don't want the answers because they know what the answers lead. They know what you're really saying.
There you go.
And that's what it really comes down to. So that's where it is,
Right. That's right, Jay. And see, okay, I don't want to get too far off. See, I knew this was going to happen.
We're good.
Because we get to going, and oh my God. Okay, so let's get on back. Let's talk about the black womb. Because this is what we're talking about in particular tonight. We're going to focus all of your wealth of information on the black woman and the womb. And I would like to establish from the start, why is the black womb being attacked, in particular in the manner in which this attack is being carried out right now, today?
The reason, and that's a great question, sister, the reason that the black womb is under attack is because all of the genetic information, past, present, and future, is carried in the black female. there have been studies that show that the DNA is transmitted from male and female. But there's a DNA that's called mitochondrial DNA. And that DNA is the DNA of mitochondria, and those are the energy powerhouses that are in our cells. And it just so happens that when a woman has a child, she can pass that DNA on to that child, on to that offspring.
Correct.
But it does not transfer from men, okay?
Okay.
So if you're looking at the mother of civilization, who is the black woman, the mother of all life, all have come from her. It makes sense if you want to perpetuate white supremacy to destroy her first, because there's no man that's going to come here but by through a woman, right? And there's no other woman that's going to come here but by through a woman.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely understand you.
And so the strategy is to destroy the black womb, and we do that, spiritually. They do that physically. They do that mentally. But the attack is there because that is the future of the black race, is in the black female. And we know this. I mean, we understand that, but we don't understand often the attack. And see, the attack on that womb is very, very serious because the female's womb, the black woman's womb, is more than just a reproduction tool. It's more than just a means of producing other life.
Right. Because
remember, a spirit is coming through that womb. I'm going to repeat that. A spirit is coming through the womb.
I got you.
So we're not dealing just with a physical manifestation, but we're dealing with dimensional manifestations as well. And see, what happens is a lot of times, we, as the sisters don't always know the power that's there, that's in that womb. The womb gets a third more blood flow than the brain. The average black woman, if she's healthy, her womb is getting more blood than her brain. What does that tell you? Whereas in a man, the male gets more blood in his brain than in his penis and in his genitals. But a female, more blood has to go to the uterus. Why? Because the uterus has to be in the perfect condition, not only to bring through life, but to bring through other manifestations. And that's what we are not understanding. And so the attack from white supremacy is to say, we got to stop the black female. And this is what it's always been. I mean, this is nothing new. You recall when we go back to the 1800s, right? We go back to how the early medical work was established in gynecology, right? The so-called father of so-called gynecology today was a white man, right?
Right.
Who, Dr. Sims, that was his name. Dr. Sims was a white man who practiced on black women, cutting out their uteruses, destroying their fallopian tubes, attacking the womb. And ultimately, out of that savage practice by this crazy doctor is what evolved into modern medical practice today. So not just gynecology, the entire facet of medical practice today comes from attack and slaughter on the black woman's womb.
Right.
And so then we understand now why when black women are having all of these health conditions, fibroid tumors, fibromyalgia, right, miscarriages. See, the history of American culture and European culture is to attack the black woman's womb. This can be traced all the way back to the 1st, 2nd century. And so, I know you asked the question, why is this happening? Why is this attack being waged? And why is it the uterus? Well, it's because the black woman holds the key to the future of all humanity. Right. That is in her. So if I am Caucasian and I'm a white supremacist and I want to keep my race on top, I want to keep global white supremacy moving, which means that I have to keep my birth rates up and I have to keep black people's birth rates down.
Right.
How do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to implement that? I got to attack the black female. I don't attack her when she's 30. I don't attack her when she's 42. I don't attack her when she's 18. I get her before she was even born by attacking her mother and her mother. That's how this works. Because I know if I'm a white supremacist and I know I want to control the future, I know that black woman probably has anywhere from 500 to 800 eggs in her uterus, and she's born with those eggs in her uterus. They don't grow. They're already there from conception. So I want to start working on those eggs real early. So I go in and I put chemicals and toxins in the food, chemicals and toxins in the hair care products, which we'll get into, chemicals and toxins into the cosmetics. Then I put electromagnetic disturbances on her uterus with the computers, with the microwave. Mm-hmm. See, this is an overall attack. So then what happens to the black female, her birth rates drop. Right. While the white female's birth rates can still be maintained, if any, to perpetuate global white supremacy.
Correct. What I was trying to figure out, what resonated with me, you were talking about the dynamism that's happening in the womb that goes beyond bringing forth life, and not to diminish that. But there is a woman, and I don't want to put you on the spot, I was trying to think of her name, who her genetic material from her womb is still being used to grow specimens. Are you familiar with
Henrietta Lack? Henrietta Lack.
That's her name, Henrietta. Yes. Yes.
I was introduced through Henrietta Lack. Funny, I was introduced to her in the laboratory.
Really?
Because all of the cell lines that we use to do genetic research happen to be Henrietta Lack cells.
Wow.
And they're called HeLa.
So tell us. Oh.
HeLa cells. And when you buy them, they ship them out. Now her cells, most of them are at Fort Detrick, Fort Detrick Laboratory, and they also have her in Germany. They have her cell lines, and all of the biological research that has been done on her cell line.
Okay, so let's talk about that just really quickly for anyone who may not know who she is. Can you introduce her to us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Henrietta Lack was just a common sister that had a cervical tumor, and it was an unusual cervical tumor because it was not only malignant, but it had this strange ability to continue to grow even after they tried to take it out. They tried cutting it out a couple of times, but it continued to grow. And so scientists had studied her. You know, she went to the physician, and they looked at her, and they kind of kept tabs on her for several years as this tumor began to grow. And ultimately, she passed away as a result of the tumor. But what the medical establishment decided to do was to retrieve the cell lines from that tumor. And so what they did, they took her cell lines without her permission, or her husband's, by the way, because her husband has actually tried to sue the American Medical Association and the National Institute of Health for using his wife's cell lines without any of their permission.
That's right.
But long story short is that those cell lines had a unique ability to keep growing, even though sister had passed away. Right. Her cell lines continued to grow. And so what scientists in the genetics labs and other cancer research labs began to do was to say, you know what, well, let's use her lines to test different pathogens. Let's use her lines to see, how these viruses, how these diseases and bacteria strains can work. And the reason why they did that is because it deals with, we call it generational analysis, when you have an opportunity to see how a disease plays out over a certain period of time. And because her cells continue to grow, they can test the same genetics against a particular virus or bacteria over many generations within a short period of time. And see, that's why they used it. But they also were working on something else, and I talk about that in my book, the book they never wanted you to read. This is part of the HIV research that they were doing. They needed her cell lines because, again, if I want to perpetuate white supremacy, and I want to attack the black genome, I have to get the black woman's genome. So they tested all of the virus strains for HIV against Henrietta Lacks cell line. And that's why when they say when African-American women, so-called, get HIV at higher rates, because they made the disease specific for those types of alleles in the black woman's genome. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yes, I hear you.
So that's what they did. There's an allele on the gene of black people called delta 32. It's a delta 32 negative allele, and there's a delta 32 positive. Of course, they're going to say the black people's allele is negative. That's just how white supremacy works. But the negative allele makes you more susceptible to catching disease like HIV/AIDS because the receptor sites on the cell are more numerous, and it just so happens that in melanated people they have more of those receptors on the surface of their cells that can attract the disease that they made. Okay? In white people, they have delta 32 positive, which is, again, reverse Jedi mind trick white supremacy with the title and with the labeling.
Correct.
So in that allele and genotype, they are not able to catch HIV or can catch HIV at very low numbers. So that's why when you look in Europe at the Swedes, you look at Scandinavia, you look at the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Caucasians, their AIDS rate is way, way lower than the AIDS rate of people of color because they specifically designed the disease to go after that allele using Henrietta Lacks cells. So when I was first introduced to laboratory, we were in the bench and we were working, and we would get the cell lines and they would say HeLa cells, H-E-L-A.
Yes.
We were never told whose cells they were. I didn't put it together until later after I did research that these are Henrietta Lacks cell lines because they didn't want to use her full name. So any biological laboratory in the world, if they're doing any kind of genetic testing, if they're doing any kind of cancer research, the Human Genome Project was another one. They're using her cell line, which makes total sense because they want to perpetuate ways to destroy the melanation of a people. And so they work day and night to do that. So they do it through their science and research. And I'll also tell you that, from that research, from doing that kind of biological research, they have been able to funnel billions of dollars into melanin research as well as a result of their findings working with her cell lines. Okay?
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm worried.
Oh, don't be worried. It's okay. If they cut us off, we're going to come back again on it.
Do it again. We'll do it again. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I appreciate that going into that because that does actually help us lay a foundation of what we're talking about because we are talking about honoring the womb. And I was looking at some of the write-ups in the Smithsonian and various other places, and they actually speak of her womb as immortal because it still grows yet today.
Yes.
So what does that say to you, Che? I would like to say what it says to me, and I think that it, if a part of our body still has the ability and the memories and whatever it takes to continue to regenerate itself, I think it speaks to, a latent or trapped potential that we perhaps are not aware of and that we do not even, I think, maybe begin to understand the level of, just the full, breadth of what our potential is,
Well, yeah. I mean, that speaks volumes because we've always known that some of the longest living people on the planet are melanated people. Whether you go into even parts of Europe where there are melanated people of color, and compared to other races, the melanite person is going to live a lot longer if they are allowed to be free, if they are not in captivity. Okay?
Right.
And so we look at Henrietta Lacks cell line. Of course, it's going to regenerate because the human body actually can regenerate under the right conditions.
Correct.
And so we understand this. I mean, in fact, Dr. LLaila Afrika would tell you, from his own mouth, when we got here off the slave ships, I mean, some of us were 220 years old. People don't know that.
I did not know that.
It showed that some of us had been living that long, and we didn't look that old because we had a different environment. But that was the beginning of our captivity. And so when we went into this captivity under European colonialism and white supremacy, then it dramatically reduced our longevity.
Yes.
Dramatically, to the point now where we're lucky if, a black male, we're lucky if we get, 60 years now.
Correct.
But when we look back at where we come from, I mean, we can get 200-300 years old. That's not unheard of.
Absolutely.
That's been documented. I mean, people think it's wives' tales when they read the Bible. They think, how old were these different races of people? But it's really true that there are certain people and certain tribes in Uganda, certain tribes, and even in South Africa, some of the native people there, even some of the pygmies who have a different DNA alignment than the rest of the races. They have more DNA strands on their DNA than average people. And they are called the holders. They keep the consciousness index of the planet. That goes back to, especially the females. They have a 6th strand, and they found that by investigating their DNA. But long story short, those people were living even longer than that.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Che, there was also a group of Africans that were being watched or whatever researched, who were documented as growing back limbs. Have you ever heard about that?
Yeah, regeneration.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the tribe, but they were, if they would have a leg or something cut off, they would grow it back. They didn't know that they weren't supposed to do that. Their bodies did that because that's what you do. The body constantly regenerating itself. We have a new body every, so long, every, certain period of time. And so the body was just replacing these things, replacing teeth, because that's just bone. It's bone, and it grows back. So under the right circumstances, as you were saying, or being fed properly, given the proper nutrients and living environment, I think that it is a little bit outside of our thinking right now in this paradigm in which we live to understand, the human potential, what our body is actually capable of doing. And I'm very excited, to be able to hear this and to, put it in perspective, because I think with me in particular, I knew, a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit, but when you put it all together and you weave that together, it becomes a very strong argument for our potential, being realized.
Right. And that's a really good segue too, because when we talk about this potential that we have, we definitely, can regenerate. That's very, that's normal under a normal environment.
Right.
Okay, so we talk about a change in our environment. So you take a people who has a native food that's indigenous to that landmass, that's indigenous to that specific climate, that's indigenous to that weather, right? Indigenous to that water, and you uproot them and you put them in another place against their will. Now, we have been circumnavigating the globe, long before European ever stepped on the planet. But there are certain DNA markers that are indigenous to certain land masses, certain parts.
Right.
So, for example, if I am in Ghana and I eat bananas in Ghana, okay, there are markers in the plant that can read my DNA as I eat it. So when I eat that plant, that banana, and then, you know, I go to the bathroom, that DNA of the banana has gone through my body and picked up information, and then I release that information back to the soil. And then the soil reads that information, and then it knows, okay, what nutrients am I deficient in? And then it'll grow, or it will fortify whatever nutrient that I'm missing just by that communication. Okay, what happened with African Americans, so-called, is that we were uprooted, brought to South America and North America, and then but our food wasn't brought with us. The food was not brought with us. So the potential of what we can be was already intervened from that inception of being from going through the Great Ma'afa, the transatlantic slave trade. From going through that whole part of our potential was cut. But despite that, we adapted to this environment.
Correct.
And when you adapt to a new environment, whatever species it is, it takes a little time for it to collect enough information to be able to thrive in that environment.
Right.
And so what we're seeing today, if there was no global white supremacy, right, we probably wouldn't have been here under these circumstances, but we would have been here just traveling and trading. We would have been here regardless.
Correct.
But the environment that we are under today is an oppressive environment of global white supremacy. It has to be in place.
Correct.
And so we look at going back to the womb, which is what we're talking about.
Yes.
We look at the black woman and we look at, okay, does a black woman actually menstruate when she's not in captivity? And the answer is no.
Really?
Females don't menstruate when they're not in captivity. Only when they're in cages. Only when you put parameters around them and controls and restrictions and abuse will the female menstruate.
I did not know.
They've looked at female animals, female chimpanzees, female gorillas. In captivity, they start to menstruate when they're put in cages or when they're put in zoos, right? They begin to menstruate. They also begin to masturbate, which does not occur in nature. Okay? So we got to understand that intervention into our natural process, okay, has occurred. And so all of us, myself included, all of us have been affected by it, and that potential that we have has been offset. That's why if I get my arm cut off, I can't grow another arm. Not because it's not possible, but because the environment has to be right. When a child is growing inside the womb, it needs the right environment to prosper. But you have a group of people, a race of people who are in the wrong environment. They're under global white supremacy. How can they flourish in that environment without some remedy, without some kind of help?
Right.
And so what we're beginning to understand now is that when it comes to this attack on the black woman, the objective, as I said before, of course, is global white supremacy, but to stop the transmission of genetic information to the next generation. That is the essential objective, because the next generation will produce a child that can resist the environment. And this is a natural biological process that all life forms go through. But if you put it in an environment that it's not used to, it will adapt to the environment because the DNA can adapt. And so you see what is happening to the black male and female is that they have to destroy the ability to adapt. That's why every time it seems like we kind of understand what's going on, something else is happening. And so to destroy the black womb is to stop that transmission of new data that needs to be transmitted to that child so that that child can come out and solve the problem in global white supremacy.
Right.
It can't happen.
Right.
And it's a biological level that this happens on. It's the environment. If I keep the black woman stressed out, if I keep her unhappy with her relationship, if I get her addicted to sugar, where she's using sugar as a means to comfort herself from all the pain that she's experiencing.
Oh, yeah, we go hit that.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
If I keep her emotionally unbalanced. All of those are environments because the black woman's body is a incubator for the child.
Okay.
Even before the child is conceived.
That's right.
It is an incubator. That means that the folic acid that we talk about, all of the nutrients, the copper, the zinc, it takes 56 days to make a baby. 56 days, it's a whole baby there. After 56 days, it's just got to grow with nutrients. Okay? So the components of a child, some of them are already there even before conception. Inside of her womb, inside of his sperm, inside of his scrotum, his testicles. There are parts that need to be assembled to make that baby. But if I change the environment, if I keep the stress level high, I keep the acidity high. If the acidity is high, the estrogen is messed up. If the acidity is high, the testosterone is messed up. So now I'm creating an environment, I'm creating a scenario, right? I'm creating a circumstance,
right?
An event of catastrophe. That's all I got to do if I want to perpetuate global white supremacy and make sure no one comes through that can change the situation.
Wow. And then I just want to add to that what you were saying about, you know, the babies being affected even before. I often speak about the idea of us having these parts of the future generations having always been with us. They were always a part of our bodies, the eggs and the sperm that is regenerated in the body. It's the same body. So essentially, the experience the things that you've gone through, your children are going through those things with you. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Because half of who they are you.
Right.
Okay? And these are different combinations, different traits, different attributes of ancestral DNA that are combined to create a new and unique person with a similar historical past.
Right.
With a similar background. Okay? And so this new person is only new in how it is being expressed from a genotype and a phenotype perspective. And genotype is just from what's going on the inside, and the phenotype is what genes are expressed on the outside.
Right.
Okay? But you look at your brother, you look at your sister, you look at your mom and dad, and you see yourself in them.
That's right.
They see themselves in you.
That's right.
So that's how they transfer on. People think that, you know, when these animals and human beings, you know, they procreate, they don't understand that in perfect procreation, it would have been a perfect identical twin. It would have been a clone of your DNA. And that's how we were able to live forever before our great fall, before we fell.
Right.
Okay? So before you procreate and you produce another self, and it grows and it's perpetual. But that got messed up when the DNA became detangled and when the light code frequency changed. I talked about the light code frequency before. A lot of people didn't understand it. They don't get it yet, but they will get it when the information comes out in terms of the DNA deals with light. It don't deal with nothing else but light frequencies. And so I can change the DNA coil. I can unravel it with a particular light frequency. It reads ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet radiation is good for DNA, but the white folks got to stay out the sun. See? But melanated people, they need to be in the sun because that's how you get the instructions into the DNA. Because there's more than one food source and there's more than one gene source. But that, I know that's a little heavy for what we're going to get into, but just to explain it briefly,
okay,
you get food from the ground, which gets its substance from the sun.
Right.
Yes? But you also have a way of doing melanated photosynthesis. The black man and woman can do melanated photosynthesis.
Okay.
This is how you get your vitamin D from the sun. You get certain elements and minerals from the sun directly.
That's right. We sure do.
Okay, that's another source of food.
Yes.
So you can eat all this. You can be vegetarian, vegan, whatever you want to be, and still be nutrient deficient because you're not getting the nutrients you need to get from the sun, because certain nutrients and minerals are transferred from the sunlight directly to the skin, to the melanocyte, into the body as vitamin D3, goes to the liver, gets converted to vitamin D, sends it right to the DNA. And the DNA takes that light molecule and uses it to transfer not just energy, not just substance, but genetic information.
Okay. So now we're talking about the true secret life of plants. I'm feeling. Oh yeah. The human.
So these are the higher sciences. We don't talk about them much.
Right, we don't. And then
but there's a reason, because this knowledge is not given to the common people for a lot of reasons. You know, I was talking with Brother Charles about the light code frequency of the alphabet of the Hebrew letters and alphabets, the Hebrew sigils.
Right.
That these are not just letters; these are constellations.
There you go.
Okay, so there's a light code frequency as well. Brother Phil Valentine talks about that as well. He talks about the light code. That brother, he has it. He talks about that. Yeah.
Right. And as a matter of fact, just as you were mentioning, the Hebrew word for tree and bone are actually the root word for tree is found in the word bone. As a matter of fact, in those same writings, you'll find often where man is described as, you know, in light of trees and that kind of thing. There is a definite connection, but we won't
belabor that.
We won't belabor that. No.
Another conversation.
And no, we won't. But one of the things you mentioned before, I wanted to just throw in. It made me think immediately of the lady who wrote. Her name was Sonia Stewart, I believe it was. It was the black lady that wrote the Terminator and the Matrix screenplay. And you know the main character, Sarah Connor, she was a black woman that gave birth to the Savior, which was a black man. And the cyborgs traveled through time to attack the black man, black man and woman. See, so this picture that we see is it's everywhere. You know, they just took it and changed it up. But that's what that woman wrote, and she finally got paid. You know, they threw her some change after they, made as much and wrung that out and hung it to dry. And, and then
I was told she didn't actually get paid, but
she didn't really get paid?
Sophia Stewart, that's her name.
Sophia.
And Sophia. And I was told that there was still a litigation, because I know even last year she was going to do a speech here. And she ended up canceling it because her attorneys had told her not to move forward. I don't know how true that is. That was word of mouth. But, it's there. It's all in the mix.
Right, it's all in the mix. But we're going to parlay that into these mental effects, the mental effects of this attack on the womb. Now, and I'm talking from the aspect of how we have been primed to not see the attack, and not seeing these, the things that you're speaking of, that you're going to speak about, not seeing those things as an attack, meaning a militaristic, strategic, step-by-step process to an end. Okay, and hopefully the means to that, the end, we're going to be able to, establish that before this is all over. But can you help us first to understand, because some people will say, and I've heard many, and I'm sure you have, that, this is, you're just blowing this out of proportion. This is an attack. Well, what? My God. I mean, I can go to the store freely, and I can buy food, and I can get, whatever it is that I need. And so what are you saying? you're really making a big deal out of this. It's just, some fruits and vegetables. What do you say? So can you help us to understand with the mental effects of this?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go there, I think it's important to lay down a little more groundwork, because I get that sometimes too. A lot of our people, they have fallen victim to the idea of not paying attention to what goes on behind the scenes, not looking at the metaphysics behind it. They've been trained. I mean, most of them went to public schools, right? We went to a public school. If you went to a private school, you were still trained to think and perceive your environment through the tainted lens of white supremacy. And, Brother Amos Wilson used to say this, the late Brother Amos Wilson, whether that put it down for us.
Yes, he did.
He said, if you don't understand white supremacy, everything else would just confuse you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true because, see, if you're a good researcher of history, then you won't have any problems understanding white supremacy and what its objectives are.
Mm-hmm.
So we understand that, we went to this transatlantic slave trade, and this thing happened, and all of this slavery went on, right? But it was the greatest tragedy. It was the greatest crime against humanity ever recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you watched Roots, which was Alex Haley's representation of it, it doesn't even do it justice. So the real story of slavery has never been told. Some of the things that happened have never been told.
Mm-hmm.
See, if you are a sex abuser, say you're a pedophile, right? They say that a lot of pedophiles were abused when they were children, right? You've heard that.
That's correct. I have heard that.
So there's a thing in human behavior when you've been abused, often, not all the time, but often you become a perpetuator of abuse, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so during the transatlantic slave trade, the Great Ma'afa was the greatest tragedy, it was the greatest crime against humanity, because it was not unheard of to cut babies' heads off. The Portuguese, they were the worst.
Mm-hmm.
The Portuguese made the Europeans look like saints. The Portuguese made the British look like saints.
Really?
See, the Portuguese were the ones who would cut off your arm, cut off your leg, and take your leg or your arm and grind it up and make the slaves eat their own flesh. It was the Portuguese who did that. It was the Portuguese who would cut the babies out the mother's stomach and make everybody watch, and then take the umbilical cord and pull it around the baby's neck and stomp on the baby. See, we understand there's warfare, and we understand that there's always been this warfare between human beings at any given time. But savagery and outright hatred was never seen on this kind of level before with the advent of the European.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're understanding just now is the level of deception, hatred, and wickedness that these people are capable of. We can't grasp it because it is beyond our moral compass.
Right. Now, that's true. You're right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
We can't grasp it. So it's like trying to explain, Freddy Krueger, Friday the 13th, Final Destination to Mr. Rogers. It ain't, he going to look at it like, I don't get what you're saying. You can't do that because we don't have the moral, they don't have the moral compass to understand that what they're doing is wrong, and we don't have the moral compass to understand what they're even doing because it's beyond what we've ever experienced, even with something as savage as homosexuality.
Right.
When in the 80s, when we started seeing more and more gays in our community, we didn't even know what to do about it. We just called them special.
Right.
But today it's accepted. Today it's considered normal to be gay. Even though when you look at it from a biological standpoint, it completely doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's against all possibilities of life. It doesn't even make sense. If we left it up to the homosexuals, there would be nobody left.
Right. It does not.
Right.
Life. Right.
Okay. So that doesn't go against the natural inclination and natural preservation of all life. is to protect itself, is to continue, is to procreate. That is a biological built-in mechanism, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And now today we're dealing with people who say that that's a choice. People who say that that's not the lifestyle I want. I choose not to procreate. I choose not to continue on. That doesn't make any sense, but it does under this confine. My whole point is we have never experienced this kind of degeneracy before, and we don't know how to deal with it. So the savagery that happened during slavery, the abuse, molestation, child molestation, this was a European practice. We can go to Greece. We can go to Rome.
Correct.
We can look at Constantine. Mm-hmm. We can go all the way back and look at the relationship of males molesting and sexually assaulting young boys. This comes out of that culture. And so all that happened was when they got on the slave ships, when they got ships and was able to sail the water, and they captured us, they did the same thing not only to the female, they did it to the boys. So we had a whole history. Transatlantic slavery had a history in child abuse. It is a child abuse culture. So we're wondering, well, what's going on with all this child abuse? The longer we've been integrated, now you're seeing more black people perpetuate the same types of abuses. But that wasn't something that was normal back in the 1950s and 40s. We wasn't going around molesting our children. Fathers weren't going around doing that on that level that we see today. Where did they learn it? Who taught them? You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And
so I'm laying that foundation down to understand that this abuse didn't just happen. The only reason, if you black and you were in America and your mama was born here and your daddy was born here, the only reason y'all here is because some white folks brought you here. Okay, so you're here because someone brought you here.
Mm-hmm.
Against their will. And so it didn't just stop at slavery, then it went on into Jim Crow, right? The plantations, and we had all that abuse. Then we had to go through civil rights,
mm-hmm.
lynchings, right?
Mm-hmm.
This abusive relationship has been going on for quite a long time. And so as the Caucasian increased his abuse, its effect on us became devastating, even more devastating than it was. But the longer we stayed here with them under that abuse, the more we began to think and accept it as normal. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so as we began to accept it as normal, and even though segments of us would resist, we were being assimilated into this. You can't just make a dude go along with servitude. You got to break him down. You got to break down his grandparents, break down his great-grandparents, steal the generation, put fear in the hearts of the babies, and control them through that mechanism. And so now, today, right, then we had, before I go there, we had Tuskegee. Black men were infected with syphilis, and you watched how the disease played out.
Right.
And denied them treatment.
Right.
Okay? Then you're looking at what happened in Georgia. They went to Georgia and infected black communities with smallpox. Not just to the Native Americans, but to black communities in the 1960s. They infected black communities in Savannah, Georgia with smallpox to see what would happen. They went to South America and they infected the indigenous people there, the ones who were brought off the slave ships to Bahia, the black communities there, mm-hmm. infected them with gonorrhea to see how it would play out. In South Africa, they went and did it during apartheid, during the 90s, during the 80s and 90s, during that apartheid revolution. They were coming up with methods of how to infect the black genome to destroy the black woman's uterus. They were putting toxins and poisons in the tampons and maxi pads to destroy the uterus of the black women in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
They were making agents, biochemical agents on condoms that would penetrate the black male's penis and destroy his sperm. Not just a spermicide, but a genocide. More than just destroying the sperm that he ejaculated, destroying the sperm that's being produced in his scrotum.
Wow.
And it's documented Bishop Desmond Tutu had a council and a convention to perpetrate and prosecute the ones who committed the crimes, the South African government. This is documented. So when someone is not a good researcher, a good purveyor of history, they don't know what has happened to our people, and so they look at it, well, I don't think nothing's going on. I don't y'all making a big deal about it. Y'all all talking about the white man is trying to do this to y'all. I don't see it. Well, of course you don't see it because you haven't studied history.
Right.
You have been born into a prison that you can't see.
There you go.
Right?
That's right.
You're born into a prison you can't see.
It's a prison without bars.
Right, but those who know the history can see the prison and have studied the prison and understand it, and that's what some of us are trying to do. So I didn't mean to go way off on that, but I wanted to just bring us there because a lot of us don't know. We don't know what happened. You were born into an invisible prison.
That's right.
And so as the white man became more comfortable with us being around him, before, he wouldn't let us carry guns. Now he let us carry guns because he know we're going to shoot each other.
That's right.
Right.
On that, brother.
You understand what I'm saying? Okay? So what I'm saying is as he became more comfortable with us in his presence, his methods of attack become more sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
He don't have to go out there and hit you with a whip no more. He's done that already.
That's right.
He's got the mental lock on you already. They say you can take an elephant, right, and tie an elephant up with a chain, tie a chain around the elephant's foot and tie it up against a fence. And if you leave the elephant there for a few weeks and eventually take the chain off, you don't have no chain there whatsoever, the elephant will stay there at the fence because psychologically you've broken it.
Right.
You've made it accept its servitude. So they ain't got chains on black folks no more. But the methods of attack have not stopped. They have not ceased. Planned Parenthood, we're going to talk about that. How Planned Parenthood was used to destroy and depopulate black people.
Right, right.
So anyone who doesn't know that, they just don't know the history, and it's not always their fault. Their parents may not have told them what happened. Parents may not have gone through the history with them. They just born here, and they know they trying to make it and survive and got a job, a 9 to 5 like everybody else.
Right.
They don't understand what's going on. But these methods are here, and they're still in effect. The white man and his white supremacy system is very sophisticated now. He don't have to go out and drop a bunch of bombs on you no more. He kill you with the food that you eat. And we'll get into the cosmetic products that he uses against black women and women in general, but black women particularly to destroy her babies. That's what it's about.
That's right.